Truth is setting us free. This is a podcast for those of us who want to be set free. Is that you? The basis for most religions is the practice of spiritual principles. However, in the name of religion, wars are being waged across the planet. The intention of this podcast is to take a step above religion by creating a personal relationship with Spirit, or the God of your understanding. These are some of the principles that are setting me and others free. Principles like peace, joy, gratitude, acceptance, patience, tolerance, forgiveness, compassion, and empathy, just to name a few. See if you can identify yourself in the stories that follow and how some of the most inspirational people in my life are practicing these principles and being set free. See if you can be set free through the practice of spiritual principles. I invite you to enjoy what follows. Good evening. How are you?
I am well. And how are you today?
I'm doing pretty well myself. It's been a good day. Had lots of interesting conversations with different friends today. And I'm looking forward to this conversation with you
Likewise.
regarding the spiritual principle of acceptance. I think it's one of the most powerful principles that anyone can practice in their lives, especially in these days and times. So first, I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and kind of describe who you are in the community.
All righty. Well, I am John. And I consider myself just a very general, universal citizen, living in the city of Oakland, California. And I'm connected to several communities within this community. HIV positive survivor. Also, I'm a senior citizen, just turned senior citizen, so that's another group that I belong to. But I'm an artist, so I kind of see and think and sometimes talk as an artist might, visually and with imagery, and see that way. And I don't know how many other parts I can put into that, except, I'm a member of the community of the building that I live in. I live in a 41-unit building. And I'm sure there's many other aspects that I could probably name, but I just can't think of them off the top of my head. Other than a living, breathing, member of the human species right now,
And for me, that's enough. And I'm hoping it is for others. I first want to give a brief definition of the spiritual principle of acceptance. And it goes as follows. Recognizing and embracing all aspects of oneself, others, while detaching from judgments. Would you
Oh, no,
resonate
no
with that?
problem.
Would you add anything to it?
Would I add anything to it? The definition is practically intimidating. Um, but the experience of acceptance is amazing. It's like walking through a door, and the door is on me. It's in me. Um, so for a definition for me, simply is getting here would be a good way for me to describe it without doing a dictionary definition. Uh, being more fully present for whatever is going on.
What do you think it means to recognize all aspects of yourself and others?
Well, that's the intimidating part, because to say all aspects is there are so many moving parts to everything around us, right?
Yes.
Everything around me is constantly in motion, and then I also am challenged with a mind that is racing a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
So with all aspects of oneself, the good, the bad, and the ugly,
Yes.
and that could be thoughts that bring up feelings and feelings that bring up more thoughts. And, so with all of those things going on, it's a practice to find acceptance. It
Yeah.
is a practice.
It's a day at a time, isn't it?
It's like a breath at a time. But yes, I definitely think it's a day at a time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would even agree with a breath at a time, depending on what the circumstances and situations might be during that particular point in time.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a circumstance where you could move forward understanding and truly acknowledge diversity of opinions?
Yes. Yes. I do believe um, politics and the political climate over the last, I could say 10 years, you know, but have really thrown, I've had a lot of, found myself in conversations with people who had very, and at the time, what it felt like, I will say it this way, opposing opinions on really things that were very important to both of us. And so I think being able to listen and hear something other than my own opinion and accept that person's perspective and still be able to have mine brought me to a place of peace, which acceptance allows that, I can relax into it, and not have to fix or change or anything else, just allow.
Yeah, I like that. Allow. So, one of the things that I've realized in my own life is that when people have opposing opinions, that's the term you use, I understand that they have a path that has led to that very place in their understanding and belief. And I also recognize that I have my own path, and it brought me to this place of recognition and belief within me. And so it's interesting to me to not only accept what it is that they have to say, but accept that my acceptance of them broadens my own perspective and gives me an opportunity to see differently what I thought I knew. Because one of the things with acceptance in my case is that I really thought I knew before before I heard the opposing opinion, and then I came to realize that it's a story that I tell myself, and we tell each other, and no one is born to hate or to fear. Those are things we learn, and if we've learned them, we can unlearn them. Can accepting differences be a positive thing? And if so, how?
Yes. However, um, I, I'm cautious about putting anything into the sort of positive realm because it's almost like picking another side, positive, negative, and so what I said was what I used to feel in this experience of having an opposing opinion. At that time, it was an opposing view is how I saw it. And I was ready to fight for it. And
Mm-hmm.
so that acceptance, what it did was create a space. Like I didn't know it was going to do that necessarily. I kind of know through the experience of it throughout my life. But once I really begin to look at acceptance as a pattern in my life, I'm able to touch that stone. I have that touchstone. And the more that I do touch that stone, it's there. I feel like I've gone off track with what you asked me. Could you ask me one more time?
Yes. I said, can accepting differences be a positive thing? And if so, how?
Yes, accepting differences is transformational for me. It's transformational for me. Because whatever fears I have, you mentioned something about that a minute ago. It allows me to walk through whatever I may think about something,
Mm-hmm.
and walk past that. And so it's transformational in that way that the differences actually become a bridge at that moment. So yes, I think it's positive.
Mm-hmm. And how does it become a bridge?
It becomes a bridge because there's a similarity there, even in the difference. If I can celebrate who I am, then being able to celebrate that difference with someone else, it there's a union there. There's a bonding experience there, um, and and in fact, it's like goes from accepting the difference to perhaps celebrating the differences.
I
Uh,
like that. That's a very interesting perspective. Celebrating the differences instead of seeing it from a place of fear. Um, that's, like you said, changes the whole story, doesn't it? It makes room for other possibilities. And it creates a kind of harmony, especially as we see ourselves as human beings, and all of us are works in progress. Yeah. Is it possible to accept something without necessarily agreeing with it? Why or why not? I may be asking similar questions, but
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. It actually is possible. And quite rewarding. And we never know what that reward is going to be before we do it. That's the exciting, mysterious kind of thing to me. It's the curious part of acceptance is that, more things come out of acceptance that I could not predict before, and it doesn't mean like I'm not trying to say this is really easy stuff. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it is sometimes like when I was talking about opposing views and, just say back when a certain person became president and a lot of people had a lot of big feelings about it. There were some people who had very, very different feelings than I had. And so what I thought I was up against was their beliefs, but I was actually up against my own feelings.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I do believe that accepting another person's belief system, a point of view, whatever, is only the beginning part of a conversation, really. And then
Mm-hmm.
you can ask questions like, well, why do you feel this way? Or, that opens a door. So
Mm-hmm. Do you find yourself taking a step back when you hear um, differences of opinion, especially political, and then contemplating what those differences are and seeing um, how to actually engage a conversation that can lead to a productive outcome? Do you understand what I'm saying?
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, what we're talking about, I do believe what we're talking about like conflict resolution almost. I mean, pretty much.
Yes.
Because if I see the conflict outside of me, then it's much more difficult to change or to do something with. If I see myself as having a part in conflict, then that's, you know, so yeah, acceptance of a difference of opinion, a very strong one maybe that really, really challenged me is actually even more of a payoff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I grow more when I am called to understand something that I have such big feelings about. And that if I can drop that, if I can, then I can actually drop being right about something
Uh-huh.
and be like I can get more into the present moment with someone. And then they can see that and go, then it becomes an experience. Now, there is no guarantee that that's going to work every single time, but it does not matter. Because I think that the more that I have that experience, the more of a principle of acceptance is cultivated somewhere in me, somewhere there for me. And so those really, really hard ones with people I think are very difficult and feel very differently, if I can become open-minded and open-hearted, to hear wherever that person's difficulty in hearing me, perhaps, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if I can see that part where I'm not the only one struggling here, to make a connection or to accept.
Yes. So I heard two things. One, that um, it's best if you're in the moment, as opposed to off in the past based on some ideology or experience that may have been part of your past. And I also heard that it starts with you. Acceptance is a process that starts within you. I really like those two perspectives. Would you say that that's true in all cases, or is that something that varies?
Well, I'll tell you why I believe that acceptance starts with me, not me only. But, from my experience of acceptance, it definitely starts here. Because if I do not come with that, if I do not, if I'm not able to access that spiritual principle in a moment, when in an experience with someone else, then yeah, I may not have a chance, with that, and we may not have a chance. So, at least for me, um, it's an opening because there are things in this world and in this reality. I could say this to anyone, and they'd probably agree with me, that challenge all of us with acceptance, with compassion, with and they're just very. One of the things for me is, I will say this, that I come up against a wall sometimes of just being a member of the human species. Okay, just being a member of this species that has seemed to taken such a place in this world with its comfort finding, comfort seeking, convenience finding, and how that's turning upside down in so many ways in this world. And so finding acceptance with that, and even with myself in this world, just being a part of this somehow, um, at moments is challenging for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a really good example of how acceptance does start here. Because it could be me laying in my bed, not able to go to sleep because I'm spinning in my head about something that I've heard or seen on the news or whatever leftovers are in there. And how do I breathe into that? And that is definitely, there's like a quiet acceptance, a very quiet acceptance that is, just breathing in, that will hopefully make the next moment, if I have an interaction with someone else, more possible in a more loving and accepting way. So it's hard though. It's not always easy.
So you see acceptance as an expression of love?
I do.
Do you think accepting oneself is the same as accepting others? Why or why not?
Can I just say they're kissing cousins? Very, very closely connected. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I know that when I feel accepted by others, when I get a hug, like you and we're huggers.
Yeah, we are.
And so when we get that hug, that embrace, it definitely, there's a connection, there's a unity, a harmony that happens, a love that's exchanged in that moment. And it is the most powerful one to me.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. It's a starting point, but it also can be an ending. It can be part of the process all the way through a relationship until we each take our last breaths, you know.
That's a segue right there.
Yeah, yeah, and so I think what acceptance has done for me is it's given my relationships longevity.
Mm.
It's created, as you said earlier, the bridges that are necessary to move past what might look like disagreements and not be so dug in. I guess that's the way I would put it. In some opinion that I couldn't be flexible enough to see with the eyes of love, and understand that I'm speaking to another human being, or the circumstances and situations are things outside of myself that I don't necessarily have the power to change. But what I can change is how I show up in the world.
Mm-hmm.
What I can change is the way that I see things. And I've learned that I've had the experience of, how do I put this, of finding out something that I really, really thought was true is not. And instead of holding on to it, I've been able to accept it and move on.
Yes.
Is there a difference between withholding judgment and acceptance?
Yes, I do believe there is.
How would you describe the difference?
Acceptance is simpler. It's a it is not necessary for me to withhold judgment to accept someone. But withholding judgment, I might need acceptance. And if I have judgment in the first place of someone, acceptance will allow me to let go of whatever I'm holding on to in the way of judgment. And that's with someone, okay? When it comes to something, let's say that someone we love and know, we find out is dying. That is a whole other kind of acceptance that I may accept it, but it may come back. I may accept it, but it may come back, And I think I can think and register in my mind that I've accepted that someone is going to die, but then it continues to come up as a question. Well, and so it's a very interesting part of the kind of the experience of it, because each individual that we have and we know that we love, that we're attached to, they just have a different emotional attachment. And so things come up from that, feelings come up, and it becomes, I don't want you to die. I want you to live. I see a sign of life. You say you want to live. Then there's always this contending with that. So really the acceptance is, I accept you now. I accept you wherever you're at. And I accept that I maybe don't feel good about it. And then that's the change there. But yeah, acceptance for me of another person that I have strong feelings about, that may go against beliefs or I may have a problem accepting, I have to be able to believe that if I think I can change into a loving and accepting person, I need to believe that about other people too.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's really challenging.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah. I've had the experience of having friends say that they're ready. They're ready to make the transition. Um, I may or may not have been ready for them to make that transition, but it's really up to them, isn't it? And so there's a level of acceptance there that, unfortunately, I believe most of us will experience in our lifetimes. And I don't think it gets easier, you know, as time goes on. I've been more accepting of people who've had long illnesses, for instance,
Mm,
and are in a great deal of pain. And they just simply have made their peace with the idea
yeah.
of making their transition. And then I've met people who were kicking and screaming and did not
Mm,
want to go, but life said, it's your time. So yeah, that's a big one. Um, but then there are those people that die suddenly, seemingly from nowhere, going from what looked like perfect health, people who die in accidents, and people who um, find themselves in situations where they're in wars or maybe even wars on the street, you know,
mm.
where they live. So life isn't promised, but life does go on. That's an acceptance that I think is important to make and important for each of us to, I don't know, um, at least make peace with, you know. Um, do you find it difficult to accept people who have committed crimes?
You know, again, it's a matter of so many parts and pieces. Um, my answer is if I find out someone's committed a crime, I want to hear more. You know, I want to know, like, what is that about? Is that if I know that, if I'm not going to hear more, then I really have no place. Of course, I accept it because I have no place questioning it. Um, you know, if you haven't lived to be the age of 10 and haven't committed a crime, then I don't know what kind of life you're really living. That's just how I feel about it. Yeah. It's kind of like, you know, when I was a kid and they said, "Hey, you're jaywalking." Well, I said, "My name is John. My name begins with a J. I can do that," you know? Um, so, uh, it is funny because that goes into sort of, you know, moralistic kind of a questioning about, you know, like I have met people who've murdered someone. And I remember this goes back. So I couldn't have been more than 16. It was right around there, 16, 17. And I grew up in a place in San Diego. It was a beach that had a lot of different, so it had a lot of leftist people. And my father was very Republican. He was a Republican, and his job required that he was a defense engineer, so he built parts to Apollo and cruise missiles, things like that. So we were very different. Okay. I had an opposing I was more curious about. So I would hang out with these kids at the free school. And one day I met this guy, and we started talking about, and he was somebody who had been in and out of jail all his life. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked for a while. We talked for, it seemed like 2 or 3 hours. I was much younger then, so it might have only been 1 hour and seemed like 3, but it seemed like a lot of a conversation because he really told me about how he hated police. He, I think 3 or 4 hours after that, went down to this parking lot and shot a cop in the face.
Wow.
It was in the news. Yeah, it was in the news. It was, and I just know I remember that from back then. I remember because it was a free school and there's a lot of leftist kind of teachers, people who had been part of the Chicago, what was it, 8 or 6? I can't remember. Anyway, he had been there and a part of that, and he was a teacher, and then he became a professor later. But I got to hear views that were not my own, and it made me question some of the things that I saw in the news. It made me question the validity of some of the stories that I would see about prisons, jails, criminals, and I know that I was, I think my older brother and I were hanging out with another group of kids on the beach, and we went through people's cars and tried to break through into people's houses. And I didn't like that. It was scary to me. And other kids would try to get me to be the watch out. And I didn't like that either. I was this kid that always seemed to get caught if I got into trouble. I was the one that got caught. And then I had to suck it up and not tell on anybody. So that was I didn't like that. But there are times when, and especially these days, when I hear about things that are going on, and I don't know if I want to categorize them as criminal acts or acts of outrage, anger, and desperation.
Mm-hmm.
So it really is this whole other conversation, but I would like to say that I am on the road to accepting, because without acceptance, I don't know that I have much of a chance of understanding, what someone else's life is like. Like, where is that conversation,
Mm-hmm. How do mercy, compassion, all relate to the principle of acceptance? How does mercy and compassion relate to the principle of acceptance?
Mercy and acceptance relate to the principle of compassion?
No. How does compassion and mercy relate to the principle of acceptance?
Okay. Well, they must relate because I got them switched around in my head. But mercy, mercy sounds to me, it just sounds like an old word, or I don't know, a word that is almost Catholic. Okay. That's just for me, right? But here's the truth. I was born in a hospital called Mercy Hospital.
Okay.
And I do believe that compassion and mercy are interchangeable. I mean, they feel very much on the same line to me. One just feels like a different word, you know. But used sometimes in ways like what is it, mercy or death? There's it's, the way mercy has been used throughout history, and the way I've heard it used in films definitely hits me differently than compassion. Um, Compassion, I tend to hear about, or I tend to have had come to me as a word differently than mercy. But the way they relate to acceptance to me is that it does require being in a place of acceptance to find compassion.
Yes.
Um, and it's interesting because the compassion, and I will say compassion or mercy, um, so like mercy, it's just funny to me how I hear that word and I think, okay, so you just asked me a word about someone who had, committed a crime, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, merciful, sort of being merciful, or in the face of something that seems harsh, or and it kind of, um, so compassion and mercy. I really feel like I need to open the door with acceptance.
Yes.
Um, Sometimes maybe compassion might open the door, but I think acceptance would come before those for me. Um,
You know
and
how
I get a little turned around with those things.
I feel that mercy is something that comes from basically from without, and compassion is something that comes from within. Um, I agree with that, the relationship to religion. But what I've also learned about mercy is that I get to experience mercy when I recognize that there are things that I've participated in my own life where if I actually got justice, what I really needed was mercy, you know,
Mm.
because justice would mean that I would probably be suffering the consequences of some negative behavior that I engaged in, um, and felt condemned, sort of.
Now that makes sense.
But mercy then um, steps in and creates an opportunity for me to learn and grow, maybe from the circumstance. Um, Compassion, though, comes from within me, and it is an expression of understanding circumstances, situations, and people in such a way that I can, it's almost like empathy, where I can identify with what is taking place um, in someone's life, for instance, in my own, and now I understand how someone else may have felt in the situation, whether the situation where you were describing the young man who apparently murdered the policeman. Justice might be locking him up for the rest of his life, but mercy might be taking a look at the circumstances and situations that created that experience within him, and then him carrying out the idea that created that concept. He may have thought that he was bringing some form of justice. Who knows? But I can see its practical application, and both relate to acceptance. In my mind, I see how different people really can come to different perspectives based on their environment and the circumstances that they may experience. Oppression is a powerful, makes a powerful impression on people. And you know, I have to admit that we live in an oppressive environment on many levels. So mercy and compassion. Yeah, I think there's a application for each of them, and acceptance opens the door.
I have to be honest and say that, mercy is just not a part of my usual vocabulary.
Uh-huh.
And so, however I see it, it's like the hospital I was born in, is the name of the hospital I was born in, and then there's the Sisters of Mercy, the rock group, and the Sisters of Mercy from the Catholic Church. But I do hear what you're saying about that. I don't believe that compassion only comes from within. And I don't believe I only have an inward experience of it. That's not something that has been my experience.
Mm-hmm.
I've had someone tell me that I didn't know very well, say to me, "I love you and I will always be with you." And I was hit so big like a flash, and I couldn't even think about it. I was looking in their eyes and they were looking at me, and I felt this experience of love and compassion. It was unconditional love.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't claim to be, real book smart or, have a good understanding of a lot of words, but mercy is one of those words that I'm not as familiar with in the usage of. So I will take you on face value on that one.
Well, I was only using that as an example of how mercy and compassion might be related to acceptance. I'm not even saying that that's what I truly believe myself, but but I have been in a position where I found myself thinking in those terms, but acceptance has changed, the way that I experience both of those words. Uh-huh. How can we make accepted adjustments even though we found, let me put it another way. Are there boundaries to acceptance? Is it really as universal as we might like to think?
There are boundaries to accept. I mean, Yes, I think that where there are boundaries, there's acceptance. Okay. You can either accept it or not. What is the boundary there? What would that be? Um, what are the, what's the blockade to acceptance? And the interesting thing about that, or what is the border? I'm trying to understand how you're saying that and what that means.
Well, in a situation with one person or under one condition, one might look at a, say, somebody who is homeless. And you think of yourself as a person who is having compassion about the experience that they're having. And then you find out that they're, I don't know, a drug addict or a rapist, and they're in an encampment, homeless encampment, unhoused encampment, and they're preying on other people that are part of that same encampment.
Okay.
Are there boundaries that you would have of acceptance with the persons who are taking advantage as opposed to the people who are being taken advantage of?
Yes, I think so. I think that, I was out coming off out of a BART station the other day, out of transportation off a train, and I was getting ready to take transportation somewhere else, and I saw a man who looked like he was somewhere else in his head, okay, but he was sitting with a box cutter close to his face. Um, and it didn't look like he was going to hurt himself, but um, I just noticed that, and there's a boundary there for me, and then I get to choose uh, whether my self acceptance, quite frankly, of where am I at with this, right?
Uh-huh.
What am I capable of doing right now? And so that self acceptance in terms of honesty about where I need to be, what I can do, what I can handle, how am I going to accept you? It may be from way over here, you know? There are things that I have to accept that I alone cannot handle in a way of support to others.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing is true if there is an injustice that has been done. People have been wronged by somebody, and they may be falling on hard times, or they may be homeless in front of me. Um, I don't have to accept them. I do not have to do anything. I don't have to change that situation. When the time comes for me to stand up in terms of social justice, because I do feel like this question has to do with that. Those are like what I was talking about at the beginning of this conversation. Being a part of humanity sometimes is very vexing, very difficult to come to a place of acceptance with, and it's sometimes in one breath at a time, with feeling like the world is full of injustices and injustice to the point of being overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And so how do I become responsible for this one little seat I'm sitting on? And how do I make a difference from here? You know, and sometimes that's all I can do with that kind of boundary.
I understand that. That requires I think, a measure of humility and acceptance and trust in a power greater than the circumstances and situations that people might be faced with, and a faith that, because I know I've been in situations that have been similar, actually, that it was possible to come out of situations like that better equipped to deal with life, and life on its own terms. How does one celebrate one's intentional differences and practice acceptance at the same time? You know what I mean when I say that?
I am you got my little computer going click, 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 click. Intentional differences.
Yes. Some people wear mohawks. Some people paint themselves from head to toe. Some people carry birds with them. Some people will live a certain way. I mean, how do you celebrate the differences? How do you accept the differences in people who intentionally put themselves in indifference?
Okay. I accept it because I do not know another's intentions. Even if they are intentionally different, I do not understand it from their choosing, their motivation, so it's a matter of me. Do I really want to know? Do I really want to see? And do I really want to hear? What is that about? I know I had met, when I was a teenager, had met men who wanted to become a woman. And way back then, that was not, it was not something, it was like, shh, but to see that happen and to witness without having to have a conversation, the transformation of someone else, very powerful. And, so acceptance in that particular way of not having to know the whole story, but being able to be a witness to someone's intentional change or someone's intentional difference. I don't understand, the intention, what makes the motivation, what makes that happen, whether that is something physiological, biological, or what are the components that I don't always know. So if I can be open enough with acceptance of who someone is. And, we've got quite a big list of variables here in terms of the spectrum of diversity, around us. How that's a really, really big question. I think that one of the things that I've seen is, at least for me, I've seen that I've had to accept myself and how hard that was because I wasn't sure what my intentions were for a long time. I really do believe, I used to think I knew myself until someone said, "Do you know yourself?" And then I kind of went, huh, oh, I better give them the right answer. And that isn't the right answer. You either do or you don't. And maybe there's another question that comes from a question like that, which is, what do you mean by that? Like, how are you speaking about? And if I can't think to ask that question, then I remember being asked the question, do you know yourself? And being very nervous and feeling like I had to have the right answer. And that's why I'm saying that. So, when it comes down to intentional differences, I believe today that I know myself more so. And that makes it a bit easier to accept people's differences, intentional or unintentional.
I believe one of the things that I've come across, and I know is also true in my own life, is that it's easier for me to see what I don't want than what it is that I do want. Do you think most people know what they do want? Because it seems to me that I hear a lot about what people don't want. And so they end up accepting whatever comes along. When in fact, we have the opportunity to actually experience what we do want, if we're practicing acceptance. How do I accept what I do want instead of accepting whatever comes along?
By accepting what I have first. Because if I'm looking for something, wanting something, or think that I need to be wanting something, a lot of times that can be a distraction from what we actually have around us. It's constantly being wanting. And so for me, that is really, acceptance really is an important part of that, because I've thought about this for a long time. Someone saying, "Oh, I really like that house. Oh, I really want that car. I really like that car. I really want that." And if I see it, if it's around me, then I have it at least to see. I mean, I have it in the way that I don't have a house, but it's that ache of wanting, though, which almost can be an obstacle to having. That is a sticky one, but I do believe that accepting what I have is important, because I don't always like what I have. And we're living in a time where you can order whatever you don't have on Amazon. or just through the internet. And it seems like magic compared to when I was a kid. I don't have to walk to the store to buy a candy bar. I can have it delivered to me tomorrow. Um,
How about as that relates to relationships, the things that you want in a partner or a marriage, or most people don't know what it is that they want, in relationship. And so acceptance is a whole different, there's a different way of looking at acceptance from that perspective.
mhm, mhm, yeah. Well, there's like, I'm okay, you're okay acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
There is, so wanting something more in a relationship, it's really missing what you have. I mean, it's kind of like, I'm lonely. I want more. I'm empty. I want to fill that with you. You know, I don't get enough time with you. I need more time with you. Those are all personal issues. Just for me, they're made up of a longing. Um, and I'm not great at this. Like I'm not great at partner type relationships necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I will say that um, in an ideal or concept for me of sort of a partner type relationship, uh, a good partner would be someone that I would have no sort of insecure or ill feelings if they left. It wouldn't interrupt my relationship with myself so much. So for me, that's the ideal, is being able to have a relationship that it's in motion, and to allow others to be wherever they're at, and be at home here. And then when I see you again, oh, it's so great to see you.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot of anxiety or wanting, or, but maybe communication about, hey, you want to go to the park? You want to go walk in the garden? Or, oh, no, I can't do that today. Okay, well, I think I'm going to go do that by myself. And I'll think of you, but,
Uh-huh. I see. You know, I have some friends that have suggested to me, um, if you're looking for a relationship, you first have to figure out what you want in a relationship and then become it.
mm-hmm.
And that was a powerful realization for me, because what I've um, experienced in my own life is I have become the person that I want to have in relationship. And you pointed it out. You had to have a relationship with you first. And acceptance is about accepting you exactly, or me exactly as I am. And then looking at those places that I may want to change, may not want to change, may want to build on, and do that. And if I find a partner, someone who would be willing to not to be another half, but to support two wholes, if you get what I mean. Be creative enough to be a part of something like a third entity, and yet still have your own interests and life experiences, but in support of the spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical growth for another.
I think a key word there is cooperation.
Mm-hmm. I agree. You know,
That is not to say that that doesn't come without challenges, of course.
oh yeah. I mean, it's a democracy. A relationship for me is, it is one where you may not necessarily get everything you want, but it's a compromise so that you can learn to experience each other in ways that are, again, supportive and in cooperation with life itself. It's a really powerful realization for me to recognize that, I don't need to look for anything outside of myself, because I am who I really want to be. And, if someone comes along and wants to grow, and especially spiritually, that is very welcomed. But it's not the wanting, like you were talking about earlier, having that need to seek something outside of oneself. I want to be respectful of your time, and ask you if you have any final things to say about acceptance, or anything that we've spoken of, and give you an opportunity to close out this discussion, because I think we're reaching a natural ending.
Okay.
So is there anything you'd like to say in closing?
I appreciate and thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation. And some things our conversations are always very interesting, and always reveal just in more ways that we connect, so I totally appreciate that, and I accept the limitations of this conversation
Yes.
in its length.
Yes, I as well do. And I very much appreciate you participating in this project of mine, looking at spiritual principles and learning how to practically apply them. I don't think a lot of people think about spiritual principles in this way. Mm-hmm. And, it's really an opportunity, I think, to balance some of the things that we see on social media and hear on social media, and brings a healthier outlook, I believe, on life itself. So thank you for taking the time. And we've known each other for a very long time. And so we've always had very rich conversations, and
Yeah.
more is revealed, you know. And yeah, just thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm going to end it here. And I think we've had a wonderful conversation, and people really, I think, will get a lot out of it.
I
And
hope so.
it'll create some different ways to think, more expansive, I hope, and open up new possibilities for acceptance.
Well, I've enjoyed it very much. If anybody enjoys it even this much of how much I've enjoyed it, that's a lot.
I will see you on another day, my friend.
All right, Maurice. Good night.
Good night. Thank you for listening. I'm grateful for the opportunity to give you an insight into how we may practice these principles in such a way that freedom comes to each of us. It's a commitment that I hope each of you can make to this practice that I know has set me and others free from the chaos and the confusion. Thanks for listening.